Second.
There.
All right, we're live back again. And now we're talking in more depth about the marketing. I mean, here's the takeaways from the first two sessions. One is you got to have a good project that's instantly appealing. And two is you got to find those loyal fans that you can make into brand investors. Doug, is that how you see it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, David Blankman did a great job of explaining how the social audience is one potential place to find potential investors for this program, but there are some digital channels that can take you deeper and get even more involved people that we're going to talk about here in a second.
And Joe, was that your takeaway? The most two important things?
Yes, and in terms of what Massimo had to say, a compelling project makes all the difference in the world. And remember, we're talking to mostly people about franchising here. Massimo's project was franchising, but it was technology first, and technology that did not yet exist. So he was selling more of a story than something that was established. For franchisors, my opinion is it's going to be that much easier because they're already going to have a presence and a loyal group of people, a loyal audience of people that will have a built-in interest and affinity for the brand. That's my thinking on it.
Which is where we agree, because we believe a digital guest engagement program, sometimes known as a loyalty program, but it's really more than that, is where we think the real rubber is going to hit the road.
Right. Do you want to then, Doug, just show us, the general state of digital or digital guest engagement programs? I mean, I found this fascinating. That Panera. Can you? What's your sense on that?
What's interesting here is the guys that were quick or fast in loyalty have had some kind of a program around since 15, 16, 17. They've obviously got the larger audiences. But in the research that I did, take like IHG, if you don't know what that means, that's the International Hotel Group. That includes all sorts of hotels, Marriott's, Sheraton's, etc. Obviously, hotels have had loyalty programs for years, for probably coming close to 20 years, I think, maybe more. And what was interesting about that, because of the longevity of it, even though in internet IHG's case, they've got 5,300 locations, I believe those are domestic. I don't think that's international, but it could be. When you do the math, they've got almost 19,000 people enrolled per location, and that's a huge number. From a restaurant perspective, only Panera eclipses what the hotel group is doing, and Panera has been very active in their program lately. It's not the subscription service, it's their actual loyalty program. When you drop down at Chipotle at 24 million people as of based on the numbers they reported in September of 21, divided by 2,850 locations, they've got about 8,500 loyalty members per location. That's pretty significant. Then when you drop down to a program you think must be awesome, like Starbucks, they're also a leading group. They've only got 739 per location, but that's because they have a coffee shop in almost every corner in some major cities, right? So it's a penetration thing. What we do know is that the number somewhere between 1,000 and probably 8,000 per location is probably going to be a best practice number, but it will depend on your concept and your part of the industry that you fill in. Like if you're a frequent place like Starbucks, it's going to be a lot more frequency and probably lower numbers than if you've got a lesser frequency for a Ruth's Chris or a fine dining restaurant that may have larger numbers of people that visit less often.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for the franchisor here is they've got to be more like pizza companies, having better customer data.
Correct. The first party data is extremely important. COVID moved restaurants into that space a lot quicker than we were moving on our own. Yeah. And then the key thing also to remember is the number of people that have downloaded your app or have enrolled in your loyalty program is not the key factor. It's really your engagement. So you have to figure out how to measure the engagement. How many of your loyalty members, your digital guest engagement people are actually interacting with your brand on a frequent basis.
And so, to bring this back to the Reg CF is unless you have a good guest engagement program, you're not going to probably have that social capital that David Blankman talked about.
Well, and that's where there will be some social capital because most brands do collect some Facebook, Instagram followers, wherever they happen to be. And those people are invested to a point. But if they haven't downloaded your loyalty app, or if you don't know anything about them, there's not much you can do with them other than shotgun things on Facebook ads and Google ads and things like that. So it's a decent strategy, but we believe going after those true brand advocates, those true brand ambassadors should be the first bucket that one looks at for potential Reg CF investors.
Yeah, let's take a look at that now, because I know that when we first talked about this with you and Joe, is that you were somewhat skeptical about this idea that the loyal customers could turn into investors. But once you thought about it, you came up with, I thought, this really good idea of these 4 buckets of growth. Can you speak a little bit more about that then?
Well, sure. We did it. Thanks for the kudos, but we did it together. I was originally skeptical just because someone likes your food and loves your brand and may eat in your restaurant every week or 3 times a week or 5 times a week does not necessarily mean they may have the wherewithal, the financial need, or even the other understanding to invest. But the more I thought about it, if you've got a robust digital guest engagement platform, you're engaging your guests and using some best practices, and you know your top 100 long-term value customers, lifetime value customers, what we call LTV, that's going to be a potential game changer. And then from there, we do have unknown guests and customers along the line that we can probably go after in restaurant. And then there's some other things we can do with the development list that Joe's going to talk about here in a second.
Joe, do you want to jump in and just give us a heads up on your thoughts on the development list?
Yeah, on the development list, I mean, for franchise sales, you're constantly prospect marketing, recruiting for franchisees. That's what you're doing. So you're developing lists. Now, not everybody that you talk to becomes a franchisee, and you've got 2 distinct buckets. Both of them are good. They're both full of people that have an interest in your brand. They may even have an affinity for your brand because they also fall into the number 1 category as an LTV guest, or a long-term valued customer. That's important. But some of them will have enough money to invest in your franchise and operate locations. Some of them will not. Not all of them will buy. So we're going to be talking about those 2 groups and how to market to them in just a bit.
Okay. And I think the big takeaway here for the audience is that these are 4 distinct segments that probably require distinct messaging. Okay, so if there's you've to use the social capital, you've built your social capital with these people in distinct ways, and so you got to cash in on those distinct ways. And does that make sense to you, Doug? Or
yeah, it does. I mean, the social capital that David talked about, it's still there, and that's technically a 5th bucket. We're just not going to address that, the next 20 minutes, because there are ways to do the way he described in the last session that are very valuable, but they're more vested than the people you know nothing about, right? You've got an idea who your followers are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, right?
Right. So what you're making the distinction is that, and David Blankman's social capital really is more for the paid marketing campaigns, and we're talking more here about the organic campaigns, or the lists that you've organically built. Is that about right?
Somewhat. That's close. So the social capital could be paid. You could also do some things organically within those platforms, but there wouldn't be a lot of response. And again, you don't know a lot about them. You just know they've followed you.
Yeah.
But with a true digital engagement platform, a loyalty program, you actually have usually at least a telephone number and email address, if not other information about that guest.
Right. Okay. So let's look at the first then bucket.
Speaking of which, so bucket number one.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. It's
There
red.
we go. Get that lined up here.
All right.
Long-term or lifetime value guest, LTV. Different marketers call it different things. It's really understanding that group of guests that have enrolled in your program. So we know that people that enroll in loyalty programs, and every system's a little bit different, but there's some multiplier of like your loyal guest that downloaded your app and participating in your loyalty program. They visit like 3 times more and spend 12 or 15 or 20% more every time they visit. So their lifetime value, when you do the math, is X. Knowing what that is very important. And what's interesting is as loyalty programs evolved, and especially during COVID, but if you'll all remember, if those of you in restaurants will know this, if you're just a customer restaurant, you may understand this. A lot of fast food and fast casual restaurants 15, 20 years ago had punch cards.
Right.
And don't confuse a current modern digital guest engagement program with a punch card, because the punch card simply was turn the card over, the cashier punches it, nothing about the customer. The customer doesn't have any affinity other than carrying a card in their wallet. Now you're actually asking them to take real estate on their phone, which is that's hurdle number one. And then to get them to use your brand after you've provided the initial reward for signing up. Different brands do different things. Some brands provide no rewards. Some brands provide really steep rewards. It depends on the concept and the part of the industry you're in. So it's very generic. Can't go more specific than that. But you want to learn about your customers, your guests. The key thing to remember, and this is where segmentation is really simple. You could segment an audience into 90 different segments. If you had 100,000 folks in your loyalty program, you could do 90 different segments. Well, nobody can keep up with that. It's hard to manage that unless you had a whole loyalty team. So you need to start somewhere. So to come up with 4 segments, 5 segments, 6 segments. And as an example, I worked for a chain that was pretty popular with people that eat really healthy, and a lot of vegetarians were part of our customer mix, our guest mix. But yet we still sold a lot of protein. And we basically did not want to send an email or push a message in the app to, hey, everybody, it's some free extra meat day tomorrow or free bacon with your next pita, right? So the vegetarians might be offended by that. Bad idea. And that's why if you segment, I know you've got the meat eaters and vegetarians, there's 2 segments you could have based on messaging, try to encourage people to try to come in and eat more of your product. So all of that said, once you've segmented an audience and done some things that are considered best practices, and if you don't, this Michael touched on this earlier, if you haven't built a program or if you don't have one at all, you need to get started. And if you have one that's not very large, or you don't have segments, you need to work on it, because we truly do believe the 100 best guests you have may be the 100 best options you have for investing in your Reg CF offering. And if you don't have it, you're probably not succeeding as a restaurant,
Right.
or you could succeed better if you had these programs in place.
I think that's very important for people to understand. And I think it's echoing some other previous thoughts, is that you're doing double duty here by creating, a better digital guest engagement program. You're helping out your chances on the Reg CF side, but you're also doing what you should be doing as a restaurateur, right?
Correct.
Making sure that your guests are engaged.
Right.
So let's jump to the next one. The people know. Tell me a little bit about this bucket. This one's sort of interesting.
So this one harkens back to those that may not have that program developed, but even when you do, you still have people, and not as many now as pre-COVID, but still have customers come in and pay with cash.
Right.
And there may be people that are still paying with credit card. And if you're not doing a program with MasterCard or something, you don't know them either. So you really don't know who they are because you haven't dug into the data. And there are some secondary data you can get from credit card companies to help you. But basically, anybody that's not in your loyalty program or hasn't signed up for your email program are unknown. Right. And restaurants lived on this up until 5 to 8 years ago. And to your earlier point, only the pizza guys since like 1995 or so had any data on their guests whatsoever. So the point is, you've got a restaurant, and granted, people walked away from dining rooms and COVID created some issues, but I believe customers are going to come back to dining rooms. They want the experience. There's going to be a lot of unknown people that haven't downloaded your app, aren't in your email program. They may not subscribe to you in social media. So put some materials out in the restaurant on the fact that, hey, you like your food, like the experience, invest in us. Check out this link, check out this QR code. It could be a table tent on a table, could be a bag stuffer in a fast food restaurant, could be a tray liner, number of different areas that we marketers know as point of purchase, POP, and merchandising that can be done to communicate to your current unknown guests that you have an offering available.
Right. So you would look at this as, maybe the guest came in through a delivery, a third party delivery. There's a lot of guests like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you really you may not have a good relationship or a good enough relationship with that third party delivery to get
Correct.
good information, but you're sending something to them, as you say. So put a QR code on that. Get
Yep.
that QR code to your landing page.
Yep.
Right? Because that's all you need. If again, it's the double duty idea here, isn't it? Right?
Yep. And then the only challenge to that for some is if you're a franchisee, you probably can't put it on the corporate web page, but if you've got locational pages and your franchisor has done things right, you may be able to put it on there. So there are a lot of different options on where to put that, because I'm even talking about the guest that sees your restaurant for the first time, or here's a recommendation from their neighbor that they should go try XYZ restaurant, and they walk in your doors and they've never seen you digitally or anything else anywhere. They're also unknown, but also a prospect if you wow them when they visit your restaurant.
Yeah, and just to add on to what you're saying, the franchisee may not have 100% of the real estate that the brand has, but the franchisor knows that the franchisee is doing this because they had to get approval from the franchisor in order to embark on a Reg CF raise. So they're going to be supportive of it because you're working within the franchise system and the brand standards that the franchisor has in order to be able to effectively and successfully raise your money.
Just before we get on to the development list, just go back to that a little bit, because on I think what people, you could do this to get people into your loyalty program, right?
Yep.
Your landing page again is the thing that's doing this double, triple duty for you, because I was picking up on your observation that you may be getting people who are looking at your advertising and or being recommended by other people, and just take the QR code, put it everywhere.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and as long as it works out with your franchisor, if you're a franchisee, and franchisors have to be careful to not use what I'll call co-op or normal ad fund monies for recruiting right? So there's some
we're going to
beyond the scope of this discussion, but
not yet. No, we'll touch on that because we'll have some time in which we'll touch on the realities of what this entails. But all right, so your ideas here on the development list. How did people get on the development list?
Well, the development list is primarily coming from your prospect marketing and recruitment of potential franchisees. Okay. And by virtue of doing that, you're going to have the bucket of people that are really interested, that were interested enough to fill out your inquiry form or get in contact with you in some manner, typically digitally. So you have information on them, but they just are not qualified for whatever reason. They cannot do the deal. And you may have had some extensive conversations with them. They may have discovered very early on that they were not qualified. So the way you're going to communicate to them, because they may feel bad that they didn't qualify, so your messaging has to reactivate their interest and key in on whatever affinity for your brand or investment that initially made them call you. So that messaging is going to be critical in getting them to say, hey, you can't say, oh, you failed at becoming a franchisee because you didn't have enough money. or you whatever other reason
Well,
you don't qualify.
but
But now you can invest this way. I'm not sure that's a winning message. You have to have a winning message for that.
Yeah.
but remember, Joe, I mean, the people that get on the development list, I mean, there's hundreds of people there that you've never even talked to, right?
But
You
that's
never
true.
got
Oh
the
no,
call,
they're in that category too.
right?
You they may have filled your form out, and you may have called them, you may have emailed them, you may have texted them, and they never talked to you. So again, the messaging has to be different. And you know what? There's gold in them dar hills. Those people didn't invest. They maybe never were going to invest. They might have some curiosity, but this is a different offering.
Right.
You get to start the clock over again.
But you get to start the clock on a much more smaller level of investment, right?
No question. No question.
Right?
It's an easier ask.
Yeah.
$1,000 versus $1,000,000.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to figure out. Oh, I might be able to do that. Heck, I
Right.
might even be able to do $5,000.
Right. And those were the people that you might even bought the leads from those web portals, and now you can actually contact them and say, get some of that money back that you spent on.
Oh, you mean sometimes franchisors waste money on buying leads?
No, I can't believe that's true.
It does not.
No.
Never happen. Never happens.
Well, but now it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Now you can.
Now you can actually turn the lists that you've invested your marketing money on. You can now turn them into fractional owners through Reg CF.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So the fourth bucket there.
The fourth bucket I think is a little bit different in that you likely have spoken to them. You may even have an application from them that tells you what their net worth is, how much cash they have. These are a different group of people. I could argue that you could segment them as one target list with one set of messaging, or you could segment it maybe as two different lists, depending on the data that you have. And the highly motivated people that did not buy may require a completely different marketing plan, but they could be whales. Now, I was in charge of development at Hardee's and Carl's Jr., and the net worth requirements there were north of $1 million net worth in order to qualify. So I'm talking about the people who did qualify but did not buy. At Kitty Academy, where the investments range from $675,000 to $3 million to build a 10,000 square foot childcare facility. Those people needed to have $1 million net worth as well in order to qualify. So they may not have bought. How do you market to them? They took the time to fill out an application, or they took the time to talk to you in a series of interviews that gave you information, data on them that tells you a lot more about them than you knew about in bucket number 3 of the unqualifieds.
And you've probably, I mean, to get them to your point, you've probably talked with them, and there were, they went through part of your franchise sales process. Mm-hmm. So they have some interest in the business, right? They but for some reason, maybe timing or something else, they didn't go through, and they may have friends too.
No question about that, and how you reach them can vary. I mean, we're not here to workshop how you actually do the outreach, but you know what? Some of those people you can pick up the phone, and say, "We got something new." It's like, "Hey, Mike. Hey, Doug. I know you didn't buy a franchise. This is Joe over at XYZ brand. Let me tell you about what we're doing now. Are you interested in hearing about it?" And schedule an appointment with them and go over a 6-minute pre-presentation on this and point them at the landing page.
So we've talked about these 4 different types of people that you should have access to. We assume that the marketing people for this presentation anyways, can put together a good landing page. But let's talk about what the difficulty here, and we're not going to solve this problem. You're asking marketing people and franchise salespeople to work together and play nice.
Well, Joe and I never worked together and played nice, did we?
Yeah, why should we start now? But for those of the people who don't know, Doug and I worked together at Hardee's.
But I think to answer your question, Michael, I mean, most franchise brands, especially in restaurants, but also in retail and some other franchises, most companies are in two businesses. They're in one business to sell food, whatever their offerings are. The other business is still franchises. And so you have to work together. In my world, franchise development might actually fall under marketing as a total chief marketing officer setup, but most brands have development set up differently, and that's fine. But you have to work together because the franchise development folks have to use a lot of the same messaging, and hopefully the marketing people have the brand proposition for the brand correct. You know, like you mentioned that Pietro does, that Massimo has.
Yeah.
That's very, very important to sell food, but it's also important selling franchises.
Well, I think there's a dynamic that could emerge from this, because this is going to be a C-level CEO, president decision. It can't happen without them deciding. And it could be a coalescing kind of effect on the disparate departments, because now everybody's in it to do one thing. We're trying to raise capital to grow the brand. And that changes the thing. You're no longer in these isolated little silos. We're all working on this together. We're trying to raise money to grow the brand. And this is the prize. It's $5 million on this round. And if we do this right, we'll do another round. And you know what you get? We get more units. We get more reach. We get our brand out there, and everybody wins.
And when we get more units in the given market, we get more money to spend for marketing.
And of course, that's the entire point of this, is that, wait a minute, no.
Right. Yeah, more point is ROI and making franchisees wealthy, but yes.
So, but that is, we don't want to, I think, paper over the differences between the marketing and the marketing on the consumer side and the franchise development side. These are often different, especially in smaller systems. And I think, to Joe's point, this is an opportunity for those systems to have the come to Jesus moment where they're actually working together on a very important project.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
Joe, how are we going to affect this transformation?
We're going to sign franchisors up and multi-unit franchisees or area developing franchisees who want to grow. That's how we're going to do it. Yeah. And they're going to witness the transformation because they will be part of it.
So, all right, that's good. That's a good way to end this.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I have one brilliant moment a month. That was it. That's all you get.
You're done.
That's it. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Doug. That was a great, I really like that 4 buckets. I think that's very helpful to focus people on the next step. Find those segments, create that landing page, start your messaging.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.